It is time to break out the panic meter. This is my cell phone, but for purposes of this prop, it's going to be a panic meter. How concerned are you about the recent slide? That's going to be our main topic today, plus a couple of things that the Preds have done wrong over their past few games that can turn the corner. And we want to hear from you. Are you concerned? We put that question out there yesterday. We'll read some of our responses and let you know how you weighed in. That is all coming up today on what is sure to be a very spicy edition of the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. I'm Nick Morgan, coming to you from a very not well-lit childhood bedroom of mine. So if you're watching on YouTube, bear with us. I'm also a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I drive the getaway car. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
How are you hanging in there after all of these middle of the night Olympic hockey games?
Let me tell you, if you ever want to feel your age, sign up to cover the Olympics in the complete opposite time zone, and you will feel your age. I require way more sleep than I used to.
Well, I will say you and Rachel and Erica are absolutely killing it.
Oh, thanks.
And if you're listening at home and haven't seen any of Ann's coverage, check it out on the Locked On NHL channel. They've been doing great stuff from Olympic hockey, both men's and women's. Lots of great insight from Erica, who's, of course, in Beijing covering the games. So if you're at home, need something else to listen to, check that out. I'm sure that you guys have a very comprehensive breakdown of the gold medal game from overnight. So
we do. Yep. We talked all about it. Erica was there in person, so we got some firsthand accounts of things that you didn't get to see on the broadcast. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. Maybe more fun to listen to than what the Preds are going through right now. As we've mentioned the past couple of days, I think it's safe to say the Predators are now on a bit of a slide. We talked about their big run to start the season. We knew that, they had a 7-game winning streak and then a 5-game winning streak. Since then, 4-6-2 over their last 12. You look at the advanced stats and they're not good. We'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of the topic of the day is, are we panicking at this point, Ann?
Yeah. You know, what's so funny is I was looking at different metrics and stats and reviewing some of the games. I thought in one moment, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. The barn is on fire, as we used to say growing up, the barn's on fire. But then other times I'm like, no, wait a minute. We can be more measured about this. So to be totally honest with you, I'm still a little confused about where I land, but we're going to break down all of the reasons for panic and not panic. And like Nick said, we did put a poll out there on Twitter. We wanted to kind of gauge the temperature for our Preds fandom, and very interesting. I was interested in some of the responses that we got, Nick.
Yeah, they seem panicked, but maybe for different reasons. And there's a lot of people that are kind of like talking about the threshold of when it's time to panic. First, a little background and why this comes up, because like we've said millions of times before, it is an 82-game NHL season.
Mm-hmm.
Teams are going to go through hot stretches. Teams are going to go through cold stretches. Unless you're the Montreal Canadiens, then it's all just one giant cluster of a cold stretch.
With Rem Pitlick.
Yes, with Rem Pitlick. Now with a buddy. There's 2 Pitlicks.
I know, but there's really only one Pitlick in my heart.
Yeah, only one has a poster in Ann's room.
Not wrong.
Yeah, but here's kind of, I guess, the reason that we bring this up is when we kind of break down the stats, it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
So we mentioned that slide. Our friend Boyd on Penalty Box Radio, good friend of Preds Nation, he posted this tweet Pulling some stats from Natural Stat Trick. In that slide we talked about, that 12-game slide, Preds are 27th in expected goals for, 22nd in actual goals scored, 26th in scoring chances, and 28th in high danger scoring chances.
Oh.
So that's kind of a concern, is that high-powered offense at the beginning of the year isn't as good in this past little stretch run. And that's big because, you look at the rundown and the Preds are still converting on a lot of chances. The shooting percentage is really, really high. And in fact, when they're getting into high danger zones, like, you watch the past couple of games, the Washington game may be an exception just because Samsonov had such a solid performance.
Yeah.
But they're not missing a lot of wide open chances. Like, they're converting on a lot, but it just seems like it's getting tougher to find those chances. They look less potent than they did earlier this season.
Yeah, and I think part of that too, it has to do with the players that maybe aren't as hot as they were early on, just in these last couple of games. And let's be clear, I'm not saying that there are players who are snake bit or in a slump, but I think you aren't seeing some of that just explosive showiness of Filip Forsberg and Matt Duchene as much in these past couple of games as what we've been consistently used to seeing, just eye test wise at, just putting statistics aside, but just eye test, you're not seeing them with as dynamic offensive pressure and opportunities as maybe what we're used to seeing. So it is a little bit concerning. Do I think that, that's all on those two fellas in the first, the top line? No, of course not. Because I do think there are some other concerns offensively as well. I feel like we're kind of not picking up on secondary scoring like the Nashville Predators are going to need to do down this stretch.
Yeah, another reason for that is just shot quality. Our friend Brian Basson, who's been on this podcast a couple of times before, he did a good piece on theforecheck.com kind of breaking down that Washington game. And one of the things he noticed was that, hey, the Preds are kind of going back to that old habit they had where they're just randomly firing shots from the point.
Yes.
Not necessarily, being a patient and kind of prioritizing higher danger chances. Now, it's fair to question, how much of that was sort of later in the game when the Preds found themselves in a 3-1 hole and just kind of had to go YOLO with the game plan. But at the same time, it's like you kind of notice that it's shot quality has gone down, and it's kind of starting to be more like panic fire, I guess would be kind of the thing. Best way to describe it.
I would agree with that. And I think that that's a trap that the Predators are going to have to really work hard not to continue to fall into, because I think that's their default. They default to that when they're not getting kind of the more quality shots, high danger chances. They're not getting enough traffic into the slot, that kind of thing. And I think they then default to those, shots from the blue line, which are okay if you have traffic in front of the net or you have people in places for tip-ins. But if you look back at some of the games, especially this Washington game towards the end, you really didn't have a ton of net front traffic when they were taking those shots. And that's just not going to win you these games. So I think the Predators have to mentally come out of that falling into the, okay, well, we just got to put shots on net from wherever and get back to being more patient. I think that is the key word you said, Nick. I think it has to do with being offensively patient.
Yeah, and the big thing is they just seem to be falling back into old habits. And that's kind of what brought up like our main question of the day for everybody is just, hey, are you in panic mode yet? Like, what's the panic meter? Like, maybe you're not full on panicking, but is there like a level? Like, is there a concern level? So that is a topic that we are going to dive into today. But first, though, want to mention today's show is brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. Football season might be over and done with, but hey, basketball is full steam ahead. Hockey is still going strong. March Madness right around the corner. So there's still a lot of stuff to get to. Bet Online has all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, Yeah, there's even bets about where the next fired head coach is going to land. Yep, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. It remains the best spot also for sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And like we mentioned, not just basketball, there's hockey, boxing, UFC, right down to Olympic coverage. And hey, they're going to have baseball if the MLB owners can ever get their nonsense together. So yeah, lots to check out. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. Quick programming note, I'm not going to be here in the next couple of days. I will be at the Daytona 500, sunny Florida, as I look out the window at a very stormy Franklin, Tennessee right now. But Ann, you still are going strong. Got a couple of big shows coming up.
I do. So on tomorrow's show, we of course are going to have an in-depth preview of the Carolina game. And I'm also going to take a look back at the series against Carolina at the end of last season and look at what have the Predators learned, and are there still some familiar hitches in the giddy up, kind of what we're talking about a little bit today, that they need to address in this series against Carolina. On Monday, we're going to have a game breakdown, and we're also going to talk a little sled hockey.
Can't wait for that. Always a good time.
Yeah.
Still talking about the Preds right now, though, kind of where they're at currently. So here's the question that we put up on the Locked On Predators Twitter. You can always find that at LO_Predators if you want to weigh in. Here's the question. It was, how much should Preds fans panic after losing these past 3 games in a row, also including kind of just the overall recent 4-6-2 stretch? Options were no worries, they got this, concerned but not panicking, and hit the panic button right now. And the overwhelming answer, Ann, was kind of where I think we should be.
Yes.
It was 77% said concerned but not panicking.
Yes. And I think that is an appropriate place to land for Preds fans. I think we're seeing some signs of some things that might be a little potential red flags, but I don't think I don't think we're headed to dumpster fire alley quite yet. So I think people need to continue to breathe and chill out. I was very interested that there were people who replied. 11% said, no worries, they got this. And I thought, I'll have what you're having.
There's apparently bigger hocktomists than you out there, Ann.
I know, and bless their hearts. I hope they're not set up for disappointment, because nobody likes the crash and burn. And we did have 11% hit the panic button now. John Boland, I thought this was a great visual. He said, when they lose Friday, then he'll hit the panic button. Consider the keys turned and the cover flipped up on the panic button. So I'm like, I feel that visual. I feel that hand kind of, hovering, but not quite slamming down yet.
Yeah, this is like X-Men First Class, where everybody's got like the missiles ready to fire and they're just waiting for that one order. And it's like, do we do this again?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say there's cause for concern. Obviously, what we talked about, they seem to be reverting back to some old habits, but I also think there's a lot of hockey left.
Yeah.
It's funny, Ann, and we'll get to some more comments in just a second, because this kind of ties into what we're talking about. But do you feel like the window is shorter to turn this around because of the trade deadline and Filip Forsberg? Because I think people want to figure out if the Preds are legit contenders, not by when the playoffs start, which is the end of April, but they kind of want to have an answer to that question by the first week of March, which is when you're going to have to make a decision on Forsberg, assuming they don't re-sign him right now, which sounds like that's kind of a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. Well, and I would 100% agree with that. I think this would feel very different if Filip Forsberg was signed.
Yes.
I think it would feel very different. I think that people, I think that we would have the luxury of saying, hey, you know what? The Predators have played very well. We can get back to that. We've got the pieces that we need. I think not. I think kind of going into a little bit of a slump, having the ebb and flow of this season and not having Filip Forsberg signed, it feels very different because you have to wonder, where is, general manager David Poyle landing on this? What is he seeing, and where is his hand on the panic button? Because some of these decisions coming up are going to be key to, they're going to be very telling of where he sees this team. And I think decisions that are made are going to be very telling of what is going to happen for the remainder of this season. So I think it adds a sense of anxiety for sure, not having Forsberg locked down.
Yeah, because I think Preds fans kind of have PTSD of the Ryan Suter situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Preds thought they had a pretty good team and wanted to load up, and then wound up kind of being screwed for 2 or 3 years trying to rebuild the system. It kind of helped that they had guys like Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis, and Matthias Ekholm already in that system, so they could just kind of pop right in there. But I do think there's concern on that. People don't want to lose him to nothing.
Yes.
I also think there's a lot of people that think if the Preds get to the playoffs, but crash in the first or second round, it's another failed year. So I do think I think Forsberg kind of weighs heavily on sort of the shortened timeline for when Preds fans kind of want this figured out. That kind of ties into another comment we got. This one was for Matt Hardesty at PredsMatt502. He said the reason for the panic button is because he doesn't want David Poyle, who knows he's running out of career, to go out and make a big splash that will cost this franchise for 3 to 5 years. The last thing he wants to see is the lifeblood of this franchise to be traded away. He also adds, you could add somebody like Claude Giroux, and the team's still not winning a cup. They need to stay the course and draft and develop. And if Forsberg is not signed by the trade deadline, then he needs to be traded. So that kind of ties in where it's like that shortened timeline we talked about, where it's, the Predators seemingly only have another week or so to kind of turn this around, as opposed to playing the long game and just fight for a playoff spot come April. Is that right? Is that the best way to build your franchise? Not really 100% sure about that.
Doesn't feel great.
It's in a lot of fans' minds. It's changing their perspective.
No, I would agree with that. And I don't know, you kind of have to look at it that way because so much rides on Filip Forsberg. If you look at the investment in this team long term, if you keep Filip Forsberg around, you're saying one thing about the direction of this team. If you trade him away, you're saying something very different about this team. That one piece moving makes a huge statement about the state of the Predators. And so it feels very anxiety producing, having it up in the air and having the team kind of underperforming at this point. So it does kind of shorten that timeline, and it's hard to play the long game. And I also think part of it is when you're entering this phase of the season, the sorting hat comes out a little bit. Now, all the points count the same amount, whether you earn the points in October or whether you earn the points in February, March, or April. They just feel very different, because the points become not, are they a good team? Are they not a good team? The points become, are they a playoff team? Are they not a playoff team? And so I think that kind of stirs up a little bit of panic when you're entering this phase of the season and the playoff sorting hat comes out and the Predators are on a 3-game losing streak. Timing is not comfortable for a little bit of a slide here.
Yeah, and we talked about how wild the stretch is going to be for the Nashville Predators over the next couple of games. We talked about they have Carolina tomorrow. And then Florida on Tuesday, which is Florida's maybe the best team in the NHL this season, top to bottom. Dallas, who's hot. And then the outdoor game.
Yes.
Everybody's so excited about the outdoor game.
We need the points.
The opponents, the back-to-back Stanley Cup winners. So so I think maybe that's another part too, is just the schedule coming up too. These are not, beating up on, kind of 50-50 teams or anymore. Like everybody the Preds play, most everybody is going to be a wild stretch, especially that last month of the season. And we've talked about that before too.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at just this next week and a half coming up, in theory, the Nashville Predators could be on a 7-game losing streak. Now, I can't think of anything that makes me more gastrointestinally volatile than that thought. So I think it feels like, okay, we've got to turn this around now, because this next week and a half, these games are no joke for sure. There are some reasons to not panic, though. And it's probably good that we talk about those coming up, Nick. I feel like maybe we need to focus on, some measured perspective coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Question, and this kind of goes back to what you said earlier and kind of ties into the trade deadline. Is there a threshold that would change your mind about what the Predators need to do?
As far as
is there
trading
Forsberg?
Is there
like a magic losing streak record, or is there like a place in the standings? Would there be like any threshold over the next like 2 weeks that would make you change course and say, maybe we do need to change course and maybe look at a trade partner?
For me personally, the only way that would happen is some sort of like long-term catastrophic months out injury to somebody like UC Saros. And let me tell you why. This feeds into my everybody take a deep breath. This team is not crashing and burning. Now, they haven't won these 3 games, but we also can sit here and say, here are the areas that they need to improve in. This is not some sort of nebulous, what the hell is going on? Yeah. Like, I feel like you can look at this team and you can go, okay, you've got to stop taking penalties. You've got to take a little bit more high quality shots. There's some very easy things that you can identify that here are a couple of small areas, improve in these areas, and you're going to be back to being competitive, even in these really tough games we have coming up. And so for me, I don't necessarily feel that sense of panic unless I think of some sort of injury in the next short term, knock on wood, to somebody like Saros, to somebody like Forsberg, Duchesne, Granlund, heaven help us, Yes. So for me, I can't even say that one out loud, so I think we have the components, and I don't think it's time to sort of game record standings. I think that's something that they can fight through. What concerns me are sort of the things you can't control.
Right. I think that's a good way to look at it. We talked about positives. You look at kind of the scope of that Washington game, and we talked about this when we did our recap yesterday. There were a lot of positives to take away from that. We don't want this to be a doom and gloom podcast. I am going to follow Anne's hocktomism here. And John Hines said it himself. He's like, I was happy with the way they played. And, you kind of heard Matthias Ekholm say that after, I believe it was the Dallas game. He's like, it's not like we suck. It's right. There's like 1 or 2 things. He's like, I would rather have like 1 or 2 things wrong that we can fix. Yes. Than something completely wrong with our game, which is where the Preds were. Let's be safe and say a year ago. Like there's something very wrong with like the Nashville Predators strategy. You don't see it this year. And again, back to the article that Brian Basson wrote for On the Forecheck, there's a lot of stuff that's going right. The Preds are controlling possession. They seem to be getting the bulk of the chances themselves. So there's a lot to like there. It is not like they're being outmatched every game and they need somebody like UC Saros to bail them out every single game, which was the case last year. Yes. Although Saros has done that quite a bit this year, we've also seen games that the Preds have won just because they're playing good team hockey. And that's why I think it's like, there's still a chance that the Preds can turn this around. There's still a chance that this is just a slide. This isn't, this isn't like the Preds showing their true colors or anything like that. This is actually, this gives me think that, okay, this is just a slump and there's 1 or 2 things that are going to get the Preds back on track.
Mhm.
And when you start looking to these next couple of games, obviously you want to end the losing streak.
Yes.
You want the panic meter to end, but if they lose 2-1 to Carolina, who's a top 3 team, or they lose like 2-1 to Florida, who's maybe the best team in the NHL, and you look and it's evenly matched, maybe just one bounce goes the other way. It's a hot take, but I would look at it and said, I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
Yes, no, and I 100% agree with you, Nick. I think the panic for me, the game where I would be like, I'm less fine is the Dallas game because of the competition in the Central Division. But I agree with you. I think if you go in and perform well against Carolina, if you go in and perform well against Florida, and I think Nashville went in and performed pretty well against Washington with a few things they need to clean up. I think this is a hockey team that has been overall consistently reliable, where they have been inconsistently reliable in previous seasons. So I think you need to err on the side of expectations, expecting them to play well and to get it together, because I think we've seen more of that than we've seen the other, for sure.
A couple other Predators notes. The latest edition of the Locked On rankings, the power rankings, came out. Predators fall out of the top 10 to 11th place, right behind Washington, who, of course, beat the Preds a couple of days ago. Yeah. Well, I would say that's deserved at this point, Anne.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with that. It's just delightful to see them finally in the top half, because it took forever for people to really recognize this team is not just stumbling blindly through the early season and, tripping over wins. This is a team that can compete, and they have competed against some of these top teams and done well. So, but again, I'm with you. I can understand them coming down a couple spots, but I think, winning 2 or 3 of these next couple games, they're going to be right back up in the standings where they belong.
Yeah. Top 3 of those power rankings, by the way, 1 is Florida, 2 is Colorado, and 3 is Tampa Bay. If you disagree with any of that, you can go on Locked On Network on Twitter, check out the power rankings, and tweet if you think that's too high or too low. Let us know where you think of that. One other note before we sign off here: John Hines, $25,000 fine for apparently inappropriate conduct at the end of that Washington game.
He was sassing the refs.
Yeah, there's no official explanation of what happened. Our friend Alex Darty found a video clip which appears to show John Hines yelling at a ref. So yeah,
I mean,
sure.
You know what? Here is my thought on that. And look, I have a bench that my children sat on when they got sassy. I am not a fan of sass. So, and I'm not a fan of rage coaches. I can't stand that. If you say it calmly. But I will say this: I love that John Hines believes so much in this team that he will take up for them in a situation like this. Now, he should not make a habit of this, John Hines. You know better. You can go sit on the bench if you keep this up. But I do love that his belief in this team is that they can win and don't need any other factors in their way. So, he believes in this team. And I think I think that says a lot to the team. I hate that it says it $25,000 worth, but I think it says a lot to how he feels about the ability of this team and his belief in what they're capable of without any sort of outside factors, we'll call them.
Yeah, so you're saying his whatever it was at the end of the game, maybe more of a statement than $5,000 fine.
Yes, it might be worth it. It might be worth it, but children don't sass your parents. Don't sass authority, but go John Hines.
There we go. Yeah. Look, kids, don't do what John Hines did, but also you can do what John Hines did. It's okay.
Go John Hines.
Yeah. Anne's children, if you're listening to this, forget what I just whispered. As I mentioned, I'm going to be off the next couple of days. Anne's going to hold down the fort. So be sure to tune into the next couple episodes for some fantastic insight. And Anne, when they're not watching this podcast, where can people find you?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com as well. Follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at LO_Predators. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment. That really helps us out with the algorithm. Gets our podcast out there to more hockey fans. So let us know your thoughts. It's just fun to hear from you guys, kind of see your takes on things, your thoughts, where you stand on whatever we're talking about. So don't be a stranger. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back here tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, everybody.